Hey everyone, it's Kristen. So we're on video 3 of this Wizard magazine, and it's talking about the best of 1998. And last we talked about the best slugfest, which was Wolverine versus Marrow. So, and that was, and basically I briefly went over X-Men 72, where it came from, since it's X-Men, and it was, like I said, it was pretty brief. So if you want to actually read that whole issue, you definitely should, because it's a good issue. And they, of course, expand more on the fight than I did, because I tried to condense it. I'm not very good at condensing, but I tried. So, in continuing with this, the best moment was Hal Jordan versus Parallax. So, for those of you that don't know the history, and the slugfest to keep an eye on in 1999 was Cable versus Apocalypse. And in 1999, you have the 12 storyline that has to do with Apocalypse. I don't know if you've read that, so I don't want to spoil it, because it's a good read. It has quite a few surprises in it too. So I feel like you should read that first, and then maybe I'll do a video on it later, but you should definitely read it. It's good. Like I said, a lot of surprises though. Some of them not great, but a lot of them were. Anyway, so Hal Jordan versus Parallax. Okay, this is, it's superheroes, complicated. So Hal Jordan basically is driven mad kind of by the fact that he sees his entire city destroyed, and the Green Lantern Corps they won't do anything about it. Like, it already happened. So what he does is he goes and this is in the 25 best comic book moments video that I did. This is mentioned. And so he goes to other Green Lanterns and basically kills them and takes the power for himself, so that he has the power basically to remake the city like his city. And he becomes, Parallax, driven mad with this power. Plus, once you kill, he killed his fellow Green Lanterns in order to, bring about his desires, which, of course, there's the whole heat of the moment thing. You're just distraught, you don't know what to do. But at the same time, there are such things as things you can't really come back from. Yeah, so he basically went mad, became Parallax, was stopped, died. And this whole thing is because I will say, like I said before, I think Hal Jordan is one of the most popular Green Lanterns. I mean, after Hal Jordan, died, they put in place Kyle Rayner, and I just don't think he had as big of an impact as Hal Jordan. And so basically the best moment is when Hal Jordan from the past ends up in the present, and Parallax knows that if it's time travel, so it's confusing. So Parallax knows if Hal Jordan is in the present, he will never come to be. Because, of course, what happened in the past hasn't happened yet, because Hal Jordan from the past is now stuck in the present. So if he stays in the present, he'll never become Parallax, because that hasn't happened yet. So he has to go back to his own time. So he's basically already fought Kyle Rayner, even though, Kyle was like, because he's like, where's Hal Jordan? Kyle's like, well, I don't know where he is. Because, of course, because Parallax is Hal Jordan. So, well, even if he did know where he was, he wouldn't tell him because, villains, you don't negotiate with terrorists. Or you're not supposed to. And you're supposed to stop the bad guys. Anyway, so, Parallax is like, he's like, I'll have to find, it's too late for anything except seeking out Jordan. And then you see Hal behind him saying, don't bother, you found him. So it's just like a really like in your face moment, like, whoa, you didn't expect that. Moment to keep your eye on: in 1999, Wolverine gets his adamantium back, which he does. So yeah, because of course, Magneto ripped it out of him in X-Men 25, and yeah, that was I think that was done by the writers honestly in an effort to show that, because Magneto had kind of been on the side of angels, for more often than not in the last couple of years. And so they did that to kind of show that he's a villain. Like, don't forget that Magneto is a villain. So the best sleeper book, they said, is Savage Dragon. Basically, they're calling it a sleeper book because it never cracks the top 100. And it's okay. In the beginning, of course, we have no idea who he is. Savage Dragon. We have no idea he has no idea who he is. He just wakes up in a burning field, with really no memory of who he is, but he knows, like, he's familiar with Earth and he knows of Earth. So he feels like he does belong there. And so he has super strength and, kind of more durability and stuff. And he's actually a police officer with the Chicago PD because there's all these superpowered villains running around and no one to stop them. So he joins the police force. And he actually is loaned out to the NYPD and other police forces sometimes. And when he's loaned out to the NYPD, he actually meets the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which, of course, because Savage Dragon is an Image property, Image Comics. So that, I'm pretty sure I have that, the crossover between Savage Dragon and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I should do a video on that too, because Savage Dragon is actually a really interesting character. And I mean, and now we know who he is, and he's basically like a villainous tyrant emperor guy, and he didn't want anyone to have more power than him. I mean, that's usually how tyrants are. And he killed any woman that he mated with to make sure that they never had a child, so that like he couldn't be, like, his power wouldn't be lessened. And the daughter of one of two scientists, she actually did like mate with him, and her father was able to retrieve like an egg from her dying corpse, so that so that their species or their race was, promised or saved, so to speak. And the scientist wiped his memory and implanted him with like 5 days of, Earth's television, so that he would get a sense that he belonged on Earth and not really question it, and just like left him on Earth. So we find out, of course, because at this point he still doesn't know who he is in 1999, or 1998. But at one point, yeah, we do learn who he is, or who he was. I mean, but like I said, he's an interesting character. He's definitely an interesting looking character. Okay, so the best new character is Calvaretto, and he's from Battle Chasers, and that's going to be, that's mentioned a couple times in this book, and it's, I'm not going to even try to pronounce his name, but it's Joe, and his name starts with an M. He was a super popular artist at the time. I'm sure you guys know who I'm talking about. Like I said, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, but if you want to tell me how to pronounce his name in the comments, I would appreciate it. So anyway, he's this like war golem who is the last of his kind because he exists in this like kind of steampunk world, and the leaders of this world decide that basically all of these war golems should be destroyed because they didn't want to lose their power in case these war golems were controlled by anyone else. So he's kind of the last of his kind. He's super powerful. He's from Battle Chasers. He's super powerful. Lightning from his hands, rockets, rocket launchers. Let's see what else. Laser, lasers out of his hands. I mean, all kinds of stuff. But he's actually like pretty innocent. He has this innocence about him. He'd rather be gardening rather than helping, or rather than fighting. And he kind of reminds me of I don't know how many of you watched Full Metal Alchemist, but he reminds me of Al, because his soul is tethered to the armor, and he's like this super powerful character, but he's a child, he's a kid, and yet he's just happy to still be with his brother. He's still happy to be, and he protects his brother, even though he doesn't really want to. He didn't choose that, but he will protect his brother if he has to, or protect others who can't protect themselves. So that's kind of who he reminds me of based on their description, because I didn't read Battle Chasers. Just gonna be honest. I didn't read, I mean, I was a kid. I had a limited budget. I knew I liked X-Men, so I bought mostly X-Men comics. I did buy other comics on occasion when I heard about a story that I was interested in, or there was one of my favorite characters appearing in the comics or whatever, but mostly I bought X-Men because like I said, I have like the Wildcats, X-Men crossover, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I watched that with my brother. He had like all his Ninja Turtle action figures, which he doesn't anymore, but like I had my X-Men figures, so we'd play together. Like he'd use his Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle figures, I'd use my X-Men figures, we'd play together. And then on the other hand, I would play Barbies with my sister. So, just one of those things. So I have the Savage Dragon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover, like I said. So I never really like, even though I bought these, of course, and looked through them, like I said, I didn't pay attention mostly to the new comics because, like I said, I already knew what I liked, and I had a very limited budget. So it's not like I could, felt like I could branch out and purchase more. So the best publisher, they said, was Marvel Comics, and the publisher to keep your eye on next year, Marvel Comics. I think it's because they did they had so many storylines at this point. Like they had Heroes Reborn, after Onslaught. They had the the Marvel Knights books, which were super popular at the time, and they also had the futuristic MC2 line that had like Spider-Girl in it and stuff. So I feel like they just, so they were just having a really good year, which was good because they were in the middle of like bankruptcy. Okay, so we talked about Calvaretto from the Battle Chasers movie. Here, they cast the Battle Chasers movie. And yes, this is how that guy, Joe starts with an M. Like I said, please feel free to tell me how to pronounce it in the comics, because I don't know. This is how he draws this character, and that's one of the reasons it became popular, because like we talked about, comics were mostly, mostly they wanted to get, they're mostly focused on the one demographic, the, male readers. certain male readers, I will just say. Anyway, so that's how she was drawn, and her name's Red Monica, and she's like a rogue. Um, and like I said, this is like a steampunk world. So you have like Garrison the swordsman, who has history with Red Monica, and then you have, and they're saying he should be played by Kevin Wall, which I don't know who that is, honestly. And Jenna Jameson, Red Monica. I only know her because I think she's like a Playboy bunny or something at that point. I mean, her name sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't really know who she is. Um, and then they said the sorcerer should be played by Joel Grey, which I don't know who he is either. And then you have Beverly Mitchell on Seventh Heaven, played Goalie, which she's like this 10-year-old little girl whose father died mysteriously and all of a sudden leaves her like these magical gloves. And then you have, Calvaretto, they said should Kelsey Grammer, which he played Beast in the X-Men movie, the third one, and I thought he did a really good job. I really liked his portrayal of Beast. And let's see. Ken Hudson, which I don't know who he is either, as Bingus, who is basically just another rogue. Like I said, I didn't read this comic book, so I'm not sure. And they said that Shaquille O'Neal should play, what's his name? Maresto, the warrior. And it's funny because they mentioned his performance in Steel. Shaquille O'Neal, he's an imposing figure because he's like what 7'1", so you would think, yeah, him playing like a superhero or a villain is a great idea because he's this huge imposing guy, but at the same time, his acting skills aren't quite there. I remember him being in this other movie with, or maybe I'm remembering it wrong, but this with one of the boys from Home Improvement, the oldest boy. He was in this movie, and it was like a fantasy movie, and I think Shaquille O'Neal was in it, and I remember Shaquille O'Neal playing a genie or something like that too. Anyway, so he had a couple acting credits, so I guess I can see why they said him, but I just don't know. And Christopher Plummer as the basically evil king. I don't know who that is either. Like I said, sometimes when they do the whole Cast the Wizard movie, I don't know who these people are. So this is one of those really, like, when you look back on this, you think, what, really? So yeah, Nicolas Cage was gonna play Superman, and it was slated to be in production in the year 2000, and the person who was producing it, John Peters, he said, he said the status of Superman is basically that the script is good, and he's currently piloting The Fortunes of the Wild Wild West, starring Will Smith, due out July 4th, 1999. Okay, I don't know if you remember that movie. It wasn't really that well received by by the public. Yeah, I think it got like a 16% on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah. So it wasn't that great. So they're saying the budget for this will be like 90 to 110 or 100 million, and that Kevin Smith was going to write the script, but he's not going to write it anymore. And Peter says it's a love story. It's about the death and rebirth of Superman. Very emotional. And I wanted to read you this quote. He says, "What makes Nick a great Superman is that Superman is an alien. And what works in this movie is the death of the alien in him and his reflection on the alien in him." Peter said, "I wanted an Academy Award-winning actor. I didn't want just a big, tall, handsome guy. I wanted someone who could make Superman work. Feeling like an alien and that we don't belong is the essence of Superman, and only Nick Cage can play him." So that was interesting. You hear, I can't picture Nicolas Cage playing Superman. I mean, he was he played Ghost Rider um in that movie, which was also an interesting casting choice. Like I loved him because I love history. I loved him in the National Treasure movies. Those are like some of my favorite movies with him in it. But like playing, a superhero, I don't know. I don't see him. I don't see that. And then Peters also said, remember, this is the producer of Batman, Superman. He said Peters, who also said he believed the Batman franchise is dead, and only way it'll happen is if we put Batman and Superman together. Um, and I thought that was interesting that he said that. Because of course, I think it was 1997. Batman and Robin came out with George Clooney as Batman and Chris O'Donnell as Robin and Alicia Silverstone as Batgirl. And you had Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze, Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy. Just like a lot of good actors, but that movie just turned out to be super, super campy and just wasn't. After Batman Returns, Batman Forever, it just went way too far to that camp factor people thought. And I believe that one has like a score of 12 on Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, I will pretty much watch almost any superhero movie, and I liked some parts of that movie. But of course, it was definitely a nod, I feel like, to the 1960s version of Batman. I mean, when he pulls out the Batman credit card to win the date with Poison Ivy. Oh, and like the Batman, costume. People have talked about that a lot too. Anyway, so it's just funny that he would say that because, of course, then we had all the Batman movies with Christian Bale, and we have, but of course, that the Superman movie didn't get made till 2006 with Brandon Routh, which I liked that movie. I thought he was a good Superman, but I didn't like I didn't like what they did with Superman's character. I feel like Superman wouldn't have, just left Lois, in the baby. Just, I just feel like that was uncharacteristic for Superman. And I feel like he wouldn't be, sitting there in a bar drinking, feeling sorry for himself. They're just, and then of course we got Man of Steel with Henry, and he was a really good Superman. And I feel bad because that was 2013, and he never got a second movie. And then you have Batman, who got, like what, 3? Christopher, what's his name? He got like 3 movies, and then Ben Affleck took over, and then you got Robert Pattinson with the latest Batman movie, and so we haven't really technically had a Superman movie since 2013. I mean, I don't consider Batman versus Superman or Justice League or any of those Superman movies. I mean, I feel like it has to be a standalone. Christian Bale. That's what I was thinking of. I'm like, who was the actor that played Batman? You got 3 movies. Yeah. I swear the heat is getting to me. No air conditioning, because if I turn on the air conditioner, you cannot hear me talk. Anyway, so I also think it's interesting that they're like, here's the top 10 comic-related and sci-fi films of 1998. Because they didn't have enough comic book movies, for sure, at that point to actually warrant a only superhero movie list. So Armageddon was number 1. It made $198 million. Deep Impact, which was, I remember those 2 movies being out at the same time and thinking, well, that's the same premise as the other one. How is that possible? How'd that happen? Anyway, Godzilla, Mulan, 120 million, which is interesting because comic book related sci-fi I don't consider Mulan either of those, but I guess she is fighting, like, the Chinese army, so maybe that counts as comic book superhero related. Mask of Zorro, X-Files, Lost in Space, Blade, which is really the only true comic book movie on the list. Small Soldiers, which is about toy, like G.I. Joe action figures. And Halloween H2O, which that's like a horror movie, so I don't understand exactly why it's on there. Anyway, and then this article mentions that there was rumors that Chris Kattan from Saturday Night Live was rumored to be playing Nightcrawler. I love Chris Kattan. He's hilarious, but I can't see him as Nightcrawler. I think Alan Cumming did a great job, especially with what he was given, because, I mean, but yeah, Chris Kattan to be, yeah, Nightcrawler, I just don't see it. And here's like the best action figures of 1998. I have both of these. Beast and Colossus, of course. It's so funny because now, of course, we have so many action figures that have come out. And I feel like I have to rein myself in and not buy all of them because I can't afford to buy all of them. And then they have like these, character profiles in here. I feel like we've talked about Spawn before, in like the secret origin of Angela in one of my videos. That basically is just kind of reiterating his powers and his origin. Like his cape is like a living organism, and his suit is also, it's like a, like a what's it called? A sentient life form. He also has like basically he kind of doesn't really have a body. So he can regenerate, limbs, even his head if it gets cut off. He can, manipulate his chain. He can basically he can't be killed. He can project energy bombs, shape shifting. He can heal people. Anyway, let's see. There's one more thing I wanted to talk about that was interesting. Oh, like here's the top 10 comics. JLA number 1, Kiss the Psycho Circus, Switchblade number 1, Battle Chasers number 1. This is, top 10 comics of the whole year. Uncanny X-Men 350, the, Trial of Gambit, basically. Gambit's secrets revealed. JLA number 2, Danger Girl number 1, The Darkness number 1, The Darkness 11, Clips number 1. So there was something really interesting in here. And I found it. Okay. What's really interesting is that this says in here, best reads of 1998, Battle Chasers number 1. Down here, they do a whole, we read it for you, meaning it's not a good book, not worth it, you don't really need to pick it up. But here they are saying best reads of 1998. Well, yeah. There you go. One of those images. Okay. So basically in this wizard, and this is Fathom, which is actually a Michael Turner character. And he, he left Witchblade to do his own characters, which he actually ended up dying in, I think, 2005, 2008 from cancer. He was only 37, so that was pretty sad. Okay, so anyway, Wizard 84, August. Here it is, right here. We read it for you. Battle Chasers number 1. Isn't that interesting? Then now all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait, well, no, we changed our mind. It's the best read of, one of the best reads of 1998. Which I'll just briefly explain, like, the history of Battle Chasers. So Joe, the guy with the M last name, whose name I can't pronounce, he was in charge of Battle Chasers. He basically, it was his baby. He wanted to be in charge of it. He did the art, all the artwork and stuff. And he actually had a really popular style at the time, for sure. But the problem is that his pacing was terrible. Like, he produced, I think, basically 9 issues of comic in like 4 years. So like 2 or 3 issues a year. So you'd have to wait like 6 months till the next issue. And one, I think, was like 12 months or something. It was craziness. It was way more than 6 months. And so basically, like, even though 9 left on a cliffhanger, they never produced 10, which would have told you what happened. And the thing is, though, I mean, it only lasted, just a short span of time because of his pacing. Like, people got impatient and they just gave up on it, which I don't blame them. That'd be really hard to wait 6 months to find out what happens in the next issue. And he, I think, is doing video game design now. I think he left to do comics to do video game design instead. And yeah, so, and there's rumors swirling around that they're going to release the 10th issue either this year in June or next year. So they just decide, hey, the company that owns it decide, hey, we're finally going to release the 10th issue so you can see what happens, or so you know what happens. And of course, Joe won't be writing it or drawing it or anything. They're going to get new writers, artists, but kind of go off of where he left off. So we'll see. I mean, that's interesting that a comic book that old and only had like 9 issues, they're like, hey, let's revive it so you know what happened. I mean, I guess all the fans of that comic book are probably going to be really happy because they finally get to know what happens. So anyway, I'm sorry I didn't think that one issue would take like 3 videos and they're each almost 30 minutes long. I mean, like I mentioned, I still get nervous sometimes. I still get butterflies in my stomach. But if you get me started, I can definitely talk about comic books, superheroes forever. Like, that's one thing I will never run out of stuff to say about. So I hope you enjoyed this video series, and I hope you join me for future video series. Until next time, bye.